Can Bo Horvat bounce back to something close to his production in Vancouver this season? Plus, we look at the Islanders' fantasy hockey projections, and we discuss Calle Odelius' future with the Islanders as a prospect. What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? And when will he be here? We've got all that and more on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. And we are now also available on SiriusXM on the SXM app. Just search for Locked On Islanders. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat with any order. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. We have got a lot to talk about on today's show, but first, if there's something Islanders related on your mind, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, feel free to send us an email. The email address, lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever it is that's on your mind. You could also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Isles. And you could follow me, Gil Martin, on Twitter at Ice Wars, NYR, VSNYI. We're going to keep you up to date throughout the rest of the offseason on hirings, firings, trade rumors, free agency, anything happening to your New York Islanders. And believe it or not, training camp is just about 3.5 weeks away. I can't believe how quickly this offseason has gone, but I can't wait for the start of the new hockey season, and it's just around the corner. So I wanted to start today off discussing the fantasy projections on NHL.com. And, you know, NHL.com is going through the month of August. There are 32 teams in 32 days, basically. And, you know, the Islanders came, and one of the things they do is that they rank players and make projections on their point totals or win totals for goalies over the course of the season and how they'll rank in fantasy hockey. And the first observation that came to my mind is that NHL.com did not rank any Islanders player or project any Islanders skater to be a point-a-game player. And I can't say that's a shock given the style of hockey that the Islanders played. And no surprise here, the number one ranked goal player on the Islanders was goalie Ilya Sorokin, who was ranked 19th and had a projected win total of 30 for the New York Islanders this season. But only one other Islanders player was ranked by NHL.com in the top 100 fantasy hockey players that you should consider for your draft. And again, I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that that player ended up being Brock Nelson, who led the Islanders in goals and points last year, and they project him to do that again. The projection on points for Brock Nelson is 75, which is essentially exactly the same as he had last year, which was his career high. And I will say this, I would take a 75-point season from Brock Nelson again this year at the drop of a hat. Nelson, the 93rd ranked player on NHL.com's fantasy list and the top ranked Islanders skater and the only Islanders skater in the top 100. Just missing the top 100 Mathew Barzal. Barzy ranking 110th. 70 points is his projection. I think that's a realistic projection, but I think Barzy can do better. And every day, as you know, we talked on the show yesterday about Barzy shooting the puck a little bit more. And I'll, again, if you want to comment on that, send an email, please do, because I'll read them on Friday's show. But hopefully, look, Barzy had 0.88 points per game last year. And that was an injury-shortened season. Can he do better? You got to hope so. But realistically speaking, 70 points is the projection for Mathew Barzal. I think the Islanders want him closer to 80, but is he capable of doing it? And a lot of it will depend on the chemistry between Barzal and Bo Horvat, because if they're going to be line mates, they've got to show a lot more than they did in the playoffs. They've got to play more like they did during those, 6 regular season games before Barzy got hurt at the, in February of last year, and his season came to a premature end. Now, Barzy is healthy. He should be ready to go. The question is, will he be? The top defenseman on the Islanders, no surprise there. It is Noah Dobson, and Dobber projected to get 57 points by NHL.com's fantasy projections. That is an increase of 8 points over last year. And again, I think it's fairly realistic given the circumstances. Obviously, also important for the Islanders is that Dobber gets that little extra bit of responsibility in his own zone and improves his breakouts and his ability to work as a power play quarterback. These are things that hopefully will come with experience. And remember, Dobson's still extremely young. But here was the last player listed, or the only other player listed in the top 5 for the Islanders. He was ranked 4th, an NHL.com fantasy rank of 130th, and a point projection of 60. And I'm talking about Bo Horvat. Horvat finished last year with 38 goals when you combine his time in Vancouver and his time in with the Islanders. Had 70 points, which was also a career high in 79 games. Also had 229 shots on goal, which is also a career high for Bo Horvat. But I'll say this right now. 60 points from Bo Horvat, that's got to be the floor that the Islanders would be willing to accept. And even if it's 30 goals and 30 assists, excuse me, maybe you take it. But to me, he's got to get closer to 65, realistically 70 points, unless he's really, really going to A, help on the power play, B, continue to be dominant on faceoffs, and C, kind of play that strong two-way game that the Islanders are always looking for. But to me, Bo Horvat at a 60-point projection, a little bit of a disappointment. But again, we shall see how it plays out over the course of the season. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about Bo Horvat. He's got a big contract to live up to. Will he be able to live up to expectations? We're going to break that down a little bit coming up next. Plus, we'll talk about Calle Odelius and his projection as we continue our day-by-day prospect look. And we have our Islanders birthday of the day. So all that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Birddogs sketch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg and give you a truly sculpted look. And they fit way better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Birddogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric. It looks just like khaki but stretches, so you can get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. And Birddogs uses an anti-stink, sweat-wicking fabric that keeps you cool and dry all day long. And look, I'll make a confession. Everydayers, those of you who know, I was in the hospital recently. And when I was in the hospital, one of the things I asked for was my Birddogs, because when you're in bed, lying there, hooked up to, an IV and all these other things, and you're uncomfortable to begin with, you at least want your clothes to be comfortable. Well, Birddogs definitely fit that bill, and I made sure I had my Birddogs on in the hospital. Go to birddogs.com/lockedon and enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. So, Bo Horvat. Clearly, the Islanders need more from Bo Horvat than 7 goals and 16 points in 30 regular season games to end the season. You can't give 7 goals and 16 points in 30 games. That is basically about a 44 point pace over 82 games. And for a guy who was brought in to be your number 1 center, for a guy who is going to be earning for the next 8 years, $8.5 million per season on his cap hit, you need more than a little better than a point every other game. Now, yes, except for the first 6 games, there was no Mathew Barzal. So you took away his biggest, most productive line mate. And yes, in those first 6 games, there did seem to be some chemistry between Barzy and Bo Horvat, and we're going to need it. Second thing is, I will reiterate that Bo Horvat, his value goes beyond just goals and assists. He wins faceoffs. He's capable of killing penalties. He's capable of being on the power play unit, obviously, if the Islanders ever figure out a reliable strategy to help him be productive and everyone else be productive on the power play. But I digress. Realistically, yes, Bo Horvat is responsible defensively. He is great on faceoffs. He does provide some leadership. He had worn the C in Vancouver. But you know what? For $8.5 million a year, you need more than that. And I think there are a lot of reasons why Bo Horvat will be better than he was in the 30 games during the regular season and then the 6 playoff games for the New York Islanders. I think he'll be more comfortable on Long Island. He'll know his teammates better. His family is here now. His kids will be enrolled in whatever schools they're going to be enrolled in. His life is now on Long Island. And he's going to know where to go to do all the things he wants to do. He'll be settled in his life. He'll be more comfortable in the Islanders system. And he should know his teammates a lot better. I still think it's important for the Islanders to find that third line mate who hopefully will help some chemistry. I don't want Bo and Anders Lee on the same line. There are a lot of possibilities as to who else could fill that spot. But as of right now, I don't want it to be Anders Lee. I still think that Oliver Wahlstrom has a shot at it. There is always the possibility of Pierre Engvall getting a shot at it to add someone who might be able to keep up with Barzal. Although, again, as we said yesterday, the chemistry with Nelson and Palmieri last year was very good. There are different approaches that you can make. And if Zach Parise comes back, that's another possibility. But I still don't see that great option as the third player on that line or I don't see an obvious option. Different players can give you different assets, different skill sets, different chemistry. But, Engvall will give you speed. Wahlstrom has a good shot. Fasching is a digger and a checker and a grinder who get you loose pucks and hustles. I guess Parise would be in a similar situation, although he has a little bit more of a scoring touch at this stage in his career even than Hudson Fasching probably does. But overall, there doesn't seem to be a worthy first-line caliber player on this roster who is ready to step in and do the job. And that's going to be something we look at training camp. And, is it possible that Matthew Maggio or William Dufour or Ruslan Iskakov get a look in training camp on that top line? I'd like to think they would at least get some looks in camp. Maybe they're not going to get the job, but maybe in training camp, and if it goes well in one preseason game, I would love to see a few shifts from some of those kids with Barzal and Horvat. But to me, if Horvat doesn't get you 25 goals and let's say 65 points, I would be disappointed. I don't expect him to match last year, where he had career highs across the board. I don't really think that that's going to happen every year. And when you add to the fact that the Islanders play a much more disciplined and defense-oriented system than the Vancouver Canucks of a year ago, especially before they made their coaching change, it isn't realistic to expect. If Bo Horvat played as well in the Islanders system as he did in Vancouver, but was true to the Islanders system and stayed with it, he's not going to score 38 goals. But can he get you 25 to 30? I think he can. And if he contributes on the power play as well and helps boost that, I think you get the 25 to 30 goals, 65 points or so. I can live with that when you add the faceoffs, the leadership, and all the other things that Bo Horvat is capable of bringing to the table. The 60-point projection by NHL.com to me was the low end of what would be acceptable. And at $8.5 million, that would be a big disappointment to me, and I think to the front office. But again, we have to see how it goes. The chemistry between Barzy and Bo is going to be vital for this New York Islanders team next year. And hopefully it develops and it stays, because it's something this team really needs to see. All right, we have got a lot more to discuss on today's show. We continue our look at the Islanders prospect pool with Calle Odelius. What is his future looking like? Scouts seem to be divided. And we have our Islanders birthday of the day, a goaltender who was a big part of one of the Islanders' more famous playoff runs. Let's see if you can guess who that is. And it was not a playoff run that ended in a Stanley Cup. We've got that and a whole lot more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So we continue our prospect look right now. And the player we look at is defenseman Calle Odelius, the 5'11", 185-pound left shot defenseman, drafted 65th overall back in 2022. And the thing is that if you look at different scouting reports and prospects experts, they are divided on Odelius. Again, if you go back to last Friday's show, you could watch or listen to what our Locked On NHL Prospects hosts said about Odelius. His skating is very, very good, and he's very good at making that transition. The Islanders, Odelius is still extremely young. He's not ready for the NHL just yet. But his skill set of skating well and making the transition from the defensive zone to the attack is very much part of the skills that this team really needs. And look, he spent last year playing in Europe. So again, hopefully he is able to get here and make the transition soon. He was playing in Sweden last year, started in junior, moved up a little bit, has played in the under 20 championships, had a goal in 7 games in that, and is more or less, held his own against top competition in his age group. But, the question that some experts have is his lack of physicality and the fact that offensively, he's just okay with the puck. He doesn't pass the puck exceptionally well. He's not a great shooter or offensive player at this stage in his career. So, can he develop that part of his game a little bit more? The physicality isn't going to be his strong point at 5'11", 185 pounds, but it certainly, needs to be at least competent for him to play in the NHL level. And, the other thing is this: as a young kid who is still trying to adjust to playing with adults in Sweden, in that league, the young players typically do not get a lot of ice time. So he still isn't getting, the bulk of the ice time that you would want him to get. And the question becomes, when does he come here? And when does he start adjusting to life in North America and the different size rink and the different style of play there? I tend to think at this point that Odelius is a couple of years away from being NHL ready. The Hockey News projected him as NHL ready in 2026, 2027, but they also ranked him as the 3rd best prospect in the Islanders prospect pool. Meanwhile, The Athletic had him ranked a lot lower, even in the Islanders prospect pool, and kind of questioned whether or not he will ever establish himself as an everyday NHLer, mostly because of his lack of physicality and the fact that he doesn't necessarily play with a lot of confidence with the puck. So we'll see how he develops. It is something to keep an eye on. I think he's better than what The Athletic projected. I think he will come to the NHL and at least make a team and be, a second or third pair type defenseman. But obviously the next couple of years are going to be very important for him. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And this is a very popular former goaltender with the Islanders who actually turns 61 today. And that makes me feel very old. We're talking about Ajax, Ontario native Glenn Healy. Healy, 4 years at Western Michigan University, made his NHL debut with the Kings in 1985-86 and joined the Islanders for the 1989-90 season. Believe it or not, Glenn Healy was only an Islander for 4 years. But for those 4 seasons, he was the clear-cut starter in 2 of them. But the magic happened in his last year with the Islanders, 1993, when the Islanders went on that magic playoff run, and Healy played 18 games, had 3 assists in the playoffs that year, and really lifted an underdog Islanders team all the way to the conference final before injuries caught up with the team, and they lost to the Montreal Canadiens, who eventually won the Stanley Cup. Unfortunately, Healy was not re-signed after that magical playoff run. He goes to the New York Rangers the next year and wins the Stanley Cup as the backup to Mike Richter, later played for the Maple Leafs before ending his career at the end of the 2000-2001 season. Healy also, when he was with the Islanders, he and Pat Flatley used to have a show, a little segment on the pregame show called Heels and Flats that was very popular. He was a popular Islander, played in 437 career games with the in the NHL, and had 13 shutouts, a career goals against average of .337 and an .887 save percentage. We're going to go back and look at one of Glenn Healy's better games as an Islander, and a remarkable game at that, a game that really illustrated how important Glenn Healy was to that 1993 playoff run. And this is in the second round of the playoffs. Islanders going up against the two-time defending Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins at the old Igloo in Pittsburgh. Game 7, Islanders had just won Game 6 at the Coliseum 7-5 to force this 7th and deciding game in Pittsburgh. And Glenn Healy, obviously the Islanders goalie, Tom Barrasso in goal for the Buffalo Sabres. And Healy ends up making 42 saves in a game that the Islanders were outshot 45-20. And the Islanders had a 3-1 lead in the third period. Steve Thomas, David Volek, and Benoit Hogue scoring. But then with a little less than 4 minutes left, Ron Francis scores for Pittsburgh. With exactly 1 minute left, Rick Tocchet ties the game. And we go into overtime when David Volek ends the game 5 minutes and 16 seconds into the extra session. Ray Ferraro and Dennis Vasky with the assists, but Healy makes 42 saves when the Islanders are outshot 45-20 and helps them pull off the huge upset that leads them into the next round of the playoffs and all the way to the conference final. It was an amazing moment for Glenn Healy, and his performance in that playoff round will always make him a part of the history of this franchise. So happy birthday to Glenn Healy. He is our Islanders birthday of the day. Thanks again for making Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have a special crossover episode with the hosts of Locked On Blue Jackets, as we will do a few crossover episodes with other Metropolitan Division teams between now and the start of the season. So look for those, and I'm excited to do that. And, we'll get a little perspective on the Blue Jackets plus their perspective on the Islanders. And it's always good to have, a little different angle when we're analyzing our team. Until then, stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. And of course, let's go Islanders.